Hello and welcome to Long Beach Lens. I'm your host, Derek J. Simpson, Executive Director of the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Today we have the hospital president and Chief Executive Officer of St. Mary's Hospital. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Carolyn Caldwell. How are you?
Good morning, Derek. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Good.
And thank you for inviting me.
Sure, my pleasure. And then once I read that you had roots in Alabama, and of course that's where I'm from, I was even more excited to meet you and glad to catch up not only on where you came from, but what you're doing now here in Long Beach. So just want to start out with your career in the healthcare industry. How did that begin and what led you to this place?
Well, it's one reason why I'm such a huge supporter of STEMs, particularly for young women. I've always, as a child, been very fascinated and very interested in math and science. And so my BS degree is in zoology with a minor in chemistry. I attended Alabama A&M University, and I did a clinical internship in medical technology. So I'm a medical technologist by training. Did that for 13 years. After becoming a laboratory director, realized that I felt I could have a lot more influence on hospital operations and how things are done if I moved into the C-suite. And so I went back to grad school, got my master's degree in healthcare administration from Texas Women's University, and I've been in the C-suite since the 90s.
And that's what took you then to Texas, because I noticed that shift then.
Yes.
And you worked in Texas. And what would you say stood out to you? You mentioned that you noticed that you could make a difference. But what were some of the things that, because one side of you is working in a technical arena.
Correct.
Management is a whole different game. But what inspired you to think that, wow, that's where you could make the biggest difference?
You know, I think what inspired me, even in the laboratory, I moved up pretty quickly. I mean, from technologist to supervisor to director, because I've always wanted to be that person that could make a change. I found myself growing more and more frustrated as a director, dealing with individuals in the C-suite. Not that they were bad people at all, but I felt that they really didn't understand the clinical side of what was happening. And I felt that if I could make a difference, if I could manage to become a hospital CEO or COO at the time, that I could be that person that could do things differently, because I would truly understand when employees and doctors had concerns, because I had trained in that area, I had worked in that arena, and for me, I think it's been very beneficial. So it really grew out of frustration and wanting to make a difference. And I've always been someone that if I didn't think something was being done, I asked myself, what can I do differently? What can I be that change to make things happen? And so I told my husband I wanted to go back to grad school and become a hospital CEO, and he said, go for it. And so here I am.
Now, just saying I want to be a hospital CEO is no small measure. I mean, that that was a big step, especially I would assume also for being a minority, both in terms of being a woman and an African-American woman. Did you find that the challenges were beyond what you expected, or just a part of the norm that you had to go through to get to the position that you are?
You know, I think part of the norm, but I was very, very fortunate. I had some wonderful mentors along the way. For instance, the hospital where I was the lab director, I was fortunate enough to be obtaining my master's degree while I was there. But even though I was the lab director, I always went above and beyond, and had caught the eye of the hospital CEO. The hospital had been without a COO for about 6 months. And I wasn't just a lab director that came in, did my work, and went home. I would stay over. I would interact with physicians if administration needed me to. I volunteered for committees. And so when they had an opportunity, when he realized that we really do need a COO, he asked me if I would be interested in coming into the C-suite and just, you know, giving it a shot, seeing what it was like, and that he would mentor me. And he did that. So that was kind of how it got started for me. And it was, you know, not traditional, but I took advantage of that opportunity. And that's what I always tell young people, to be prepared for opportunity when it presents itself. Regardless of what job you're doing, always go above and beyond. I had no idea. When I was in grad school, I had no idea that I would end up being COO at that hospital and then ultimately the interim CEO. I thought I would go the traditional route, finish my master's degree, do a fellowship, do an internship. But because I always went above and beyond, I caught the eye of the CEO, and so he took a chance on me, and we're still very, very good friends today.
I think that's amazing advice. Two things you said. One was the importance of a mentor.
Yes.
And it's finding the right mentor, not
Right.
just because of the right title that one might assume. Because if the title doesn't have time for you, then so what? So mentor was one thing. But then the other thing you say is also taking advantage of opportunities and getting involved and building those relationships, not just showing up, doing your job, and leaving. And as I mentioned as we started this show, several of the people working on the show are interns. And I think it's a lot to be said about doing that little something extra to bring attention to yourself. But you found that to be very true in your life, and I know I have in mine.
Yeah, it is. And I spend a lot of time mentoring young people. Right. I have so many young people that are now COOs or CEOs that
Wow.
I took a chance on and I mentored. And as you said, something very important is finding the right mentor. Right. Because there's a difference between someone saying they're mentoring you and someone who's really your champion. Right. That's going to really take you under your wing and tell you the truth, you know, because that was a wonderful thing about, you know, this gentleman that brought me into the C-suite. When I screwed up, he told me, you know, he didn't bring me in and just watch me fail. He gave me honest feedback because he knew, number one, he knew he was taking a chance on me. Right. And when I would do something wrong, he would come in and close the door and say, okay, you know, you blew it this time, but here's what we're going to do, and I'm going to help you. And we still laugh about that today. And I said, you know, there are probably so many times you should have just got rid of me. He goes, no. He goes, I knew you had potential, and I knew that if I was just patient with you and mentored you, that you would be a great executive one day. And so,
yeah, that insight is important too. I think especially for me, being in a leadership, and I'm sure if you have several CEOs that you've mentored, the insight to see in other people what they can't see in themselves, I think is powerful as well. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And that's what some of the young people that I've mentored is that one young lady I'm extremely proud of. She just turned 30, and she got her first COO job last year. I hired her when she was 23, when I was CEO in Kansas City. And I was so impressed with her from day one. So when I relocated to California and I had an opportunity, I called her, brought her out to the Palm Springs area with me, continued to mentor her, and she got her first COO job last year in Florida. And
at 30 years old? At
30 years old. Wow. But at 23, when she walked in my door to interview, I said, this young lady is special. She's going places.
Now, I read about, you know, your success and successful turnarounds. What are the values and strategies that you feel are important when you were leading teams to do those turnarounds? What was important to you to make that happen as a team?
You know, I think the most important thing, I mean, I've done a lot of turnarounds. Turnarounds are very difficult, but the main thing is going into the organization and realizing that, you know, it needs to be turned around, and you have to have the ability to quickly assess the situation. The one advice that I was given, and this was by a physician years ago, is that going in to do a turnaround, and it was, you know, a troubled organization, and he said to me, Carolyn, people like to win, and they like to be on a winning team. And so when you can create a scenario where people see that, number one, there's hope, number two, there's a vision, and number three, that we can win, and you start showing small achievements. People get excited, and then they want to follow you, and they go, you know, we can do this. But you have to show them that, you know, we can be victorious. But if you go in and it's just, you know, things are bad, and, you know, I'm here to, you know, turn things around, you have to have people excited and have them want to follow you.
They feed off of your energy.
They feed off your energy. And I tend to be, you know, I have a lot of energy and kind of hyper, and so people get energy from that.
Yeah, now we just have a few more minutes before we go to a break. This is going by fast. I have so much to ask you. But I read about $70 million construction project and an $85 million.
Yes.
Now you got to put on a totally different hat, I would imagine, for construction projects, huh?
You know, I think that's the science in me. I love construction. I love taking a project and taking something and then seeing what it's going to become, getting people engaged in it. And when you do a construction project, you touch so many people's lives.
Yes,
People get excited, and you say, okay, this is what it looks like today. This is what it's going to look like in the future. You get to deal with builders, contractors, doctors and nurses get excited because they get to have something new, and you're impacting the way care is going to be delivered. And to me, it really is all about that teamwork, but it's that excitement of taking something either old that you are remodeling or a total greenfield where there's just land and dirt and you end up with a new building.
And this was in Texas, right?
One was in Texas, one was in Missouri.
So I know in Texas you had a lot of land and dirt.
A lot of land and dirt, yes.
being out in Texas. So before we go to break, since we've been talking a lot about leadership, if you could say something to a young professional right now about the importance of taking on a leadership role, whether it be in terms of a team or just being a leader themselves, what would you say to them?
I think the first thing I would say is number one, know yourself, right? You have to know who you are and what your capabilities are. I always tell people you have to be humble as well, when you're working with people. And then the essence of leadership is being respectful of people. If you're respectful, if you're humble, if you have a can-do attitude, then people will want to follow you. But if you're nasty or mean to people, no matter how smart you are, you're not going to be a successful leader.
Great. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and share more about St. Mary's Hospital. We're here and have the pleasure of speaking with Ms. Carolyn Caldwell, who is the CEO of the hospital. Stay tuned for more of Long Beach Lens. Welcome back. I'm Derek Simpson. We are here with Carolyn Caldwell, Hospital President and Chief Executive Officer at St. Mary's Hospital. Carolyn, we were sharing a lot about sort of your career path and getting into the healthcare industry, and from Alabama at Alabama A&M, and we shared that I'm from Mobile, so great to see we have common roots there. And then you moved on to Texas and then to Palm Springs, and now you at one of the most historical hospitals in our community, which is St. Mary's Hospital. How did you land there, and tell us about that journey?
You know, I feel so fortunate. I had a recruiter reach out to me, and after doing some research, and my husband and I came out to visit a couple of times, the facility really aligned with my values and with my mission. And so I feel so fortunate to have the opportunity to lead an organization that has played such a significant role in the greater community of Long Beach for over 90 years. You know, our mission around taking care of all individuals, you know, regardless of their ability to pay, their vulnerability, what zip code they live in. I mean, that's what healthcare really should be about. Our sponsoring congregation, the Sisters of the Incarnate Word of Houston, still, you know, the sisters play such a valuable role in our facility, and I think that is really what has kept our mission so strong of caring for the most vulnerable populations in our community.
Is there a particular, I know trauma was one of the things I believe I read, but if you were to think St. Mary's, are there, within your industry, are there specific areas of expertise that as a patient I should know, or as your profession knows, that says, yeah, St. Mary's is the place to go if you have X?
Well, you know, the one thing I would say is just top-notch care.
Gotcha.
You know, it's such a jewel here in our community, but our trauma center, I put it up against any trauma center. And so, because we have people on standby 24/7 to take care of individuals, you know, at their sickest. And I spend a lot of time going to our emergency department, spending time in that area. We also have an outstanding cardiology program as well. One program I'm very, very proud of is our CARE program. It's our comprehensive Center for AIDS and Resource Education that's been here since 1986, which was started by our sisters at a time when young men were dying, you know, in the greater Long Beach area that were suffering from HIV and AIDS. And that program has continued to grow and is very strong here in our community. We have a very strong women's program, all private rooms. So I make a lot of rounds in our hospital and spend time with our patients. And it's really a wonderful, wonderful place to work. And I think the fact that we are such an advanced facility, but I can't take away from the fact that the compassion and empathy that we provide to our patients and community. We have physicians and employees that have been affiliated with that facility for over 40 years. And you can tell that when you're there at that facility.
I mentioned before we started the show that I have a very dear friend that's a nurse and worked in a hospital, still does. And listening to her, especially now that she's moved back to another state and working, it just seems to me, and I know it is here too, the relationship between senior management and the frontline staff, and us as senior managers understanding the true needs of those on the front line, because they basically make us who we are. They either make us or break us in terms of our leadership possibilities. But how do you see your relationship? Because you talked about mentoring in the first part of the show. When you look at the evolution of how you do things in terms of procedures in the hospital and how you can continue that level of excellence, how do you see engaging those people on the front line to ensure that they're bought into the vision that you have?
And you're absolutely right. The care is done at the bedside.
Right.
You know, as senior leaders, I look at our role as being able to remove barriers so that they can do their jobs. And that is why I like making rounds. I like talking to our employees. And when I make rounds, and I round nights, weekends, days, and I ask simple questions. How's your day going? Do you have enough staff? Are there things we can do for you? We have employee forums. My entire leadership team makes rounds because we know how important it is to listen, and not just to our employees, but also to our physicians, because they are such vital members of the team as well.
And that means listening means that you pay attention and you follow up when it's a possibility to follow up in the right way.
And the thing with healthcare now, I mean, there's been a lot of changes, obviously, throughout the years. There are a lot of regulatory, a lot of compliance things that we have to follow. But the one thing that is always going to be true, and that is that we take care of patients. And so when people ask me, Carolyn, there have been so many changes in healthcare, how do you guys deal with it? And there has been. I mean, I've been around for a long time. But the one thing that's always true is that no matter what regulations occur, no matter how many cuts we have to our reimbursement, we always take care of patients because that's what we do. We're trained to be here for our patients and our community. And I think as leaders, as long as we understand that that's the most important thing to our employees, then we know we have to remove the barriers, but to make sure they have the staff and the resources they need so they can feel good about doing their jobs every day. So it's really taking care of those that take care of our patients.
Sounds like if I'm a patient or an employee, that's the place I want to be.
Absolutely.
Right? So let's talk about expanding from that campus into the community, because you are a part of the community. How do you, as a CEO, see St. Mary's continuing to do what they are already doing in terms of collaborations within the community? But do you have any particular ideas that you say, wow, what if we could do these things with these groups? Does that thought ever come to mind in terms of how we can work with you, like agencies like ourselves?
Yeah, that was the one thing that I was so impressed when I was looking at St. Mary, because the organization, I mean, Dignity Health, St. Mary, the work they do in the community, our partnerships with other community partners. We have our mobile unit that goes out into the community, because it's not just about sick care, it's about health care and how we reach out to individuals who are homeless or people who maybe can't get to the facility. That's why our mobile van has the ability to go out. We go out and do health fairs into the community. Presentations like this, just letting people know, who we are and the services we provide. The care doesn't just stop and start within our four corners of our facility. It's so important that we go out and we partner within our community. And I think you would be hard pressed to not talk with someone who's not seen St. Mary all over the greater Long Beach area, whether it's at a talk or a health fair or a mobile unit.
No, you do have a tremendous reputation, and I know people like Dr. Minnie Douglas, who reached out to me even about getting you involved. So you even have supporters of the community as ambassadors for the hospital as well. Yeah,
we have a very, very strong community board. Dr. Douglas is one of our community board members, and we look to them, as our ambassadors, as our voice in the community to let us know, are we missing something? Are there areas that maybe we should be focusing that we're not?
So Long Beach Community Action Partnership, our mission is to help families move from poverty to self-sustainability. And so clearly any issues that are impacting those of low income are of great concern to us. And I like what you were saying about it's not sick care, it's health care. How do you see the hospital leading in that capacity in our community in terms of being attentive to the needs of those who are low income, and then how do you help take that forward in providing the health care that you mentioned?
I think that is so much a part of who we are as Dignity and as St. Mary, is that's our mission, is taking care of those who are vulnerable. We have a strategy meeting every Tuesday and Thursday, and we had that discussion just this morning talking about the homeless population.
Which is growing,
it is growing. I think this morning we said between LA County and the Long Beach area, 60,000 people.
Yeah.
And that was what we were discussing this morning, because when it rains or when the weather's bad, they come to the facility looking for shelter. And we don't turn them away. I mean, we take care of them. We try to work with other community resources to try to transition them. to a better way of life. And that's just something we were saying is that, you know, individuals need hope. They need jobs. They need resources. And that is where I think as leaders in the community, we can work with other community groups to not look away, you know, realize that these are people, their mothers, their fathers, their sons, their daughters. How do we all work together to try to get them to a better place in life and not just look away, because they are people, you know, they're not these faceless people that walk around on our streets every day. And so that made me feel good this morning to hear my team talk about that is, you know, we know the weather's getting cold and they're probably going to be coming in for shelter. What can we do to make sure that we can not only provide care for them, but try to help them transition once they leave the facility?
In the brief 2 minutes or less that we have left, as you sit here, Carolyn, what do you see, what's your vision for St. Mary's in the next 5 years? If you were really to do what you want as a leader in this community with that strong team that you're building there, what would you like to see St. Mary's do in terms of its growth and impact?
I would really like to see our facility continue to grow our footprint. We have several outpatient facilities there on our campus, but I would like to see us expand that more into the community. I would definitely like to see us continue to work with our community partners to address the issues of behavioral health, the issues of homelessness, and really to be seen as a beacon of hope in this community. You know, if there's anything that we can change as a healthcare industry going forward, is that we focus on quality. When people come to the hospital, you know, we all hope that they're going to get better. We should be that beacon of hope. And if we can do anything to try to eliminate disparities in care, injustice, inequalities in care, particularly around vulnerable populations or people of color, I want us to be a part of that.
Well, I just love talking with you. I'm so happy that we got to meet. I love your vision, and just know that Long Beach Community Action Partnership is here if you ever need us. So welcome to the community, and thank you for all that you do.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me as a guest today.
Sure. I'd like to, again, thank Carolyn Caldwell for joining us on today's show. Be sure to follow PadNet TV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest updates. We also welcome your comments and thoughts regarding this show as we strive to make Long Beach Lens a favorite source of local news, information, and entertainment. This show has been brought to you with the support of the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Thank you for watching Long Beach Lens.